So I'm Robert Harris. I'm a senior principal engineer at CFD Research, and this talk is introducing a continuum rarefied capability for PSI applications. This is a brief outline. So I'll start by going through the importance of mixed continuum rarefied flow in PSI. After that, I'll go through some verification and validation studies that we've done with the Loci-Boltzmann code and some comparisons that we've done against DSMC predictions. Next, I'll talk about plume impingement at near vacuum conditions and describe how we couple with different continuum solvers, including the Loci-Chem and the Loci-GGFS solver, which was just described by Manuel Gale. And then I'll touch on some ongoing and future work at the conclusion. Next slide, please. So lunar PSI predictions must accommodate the complexities of multiple transitions between continuum and rarefied regions across plume impingement flow. And experiments have demonstrated that surface shear stress is strongly altered by rarefaction effects that predictions must capture at PSI viscous surface erosion onset, as well as during crater growth and ejector stream progression. Now, we've developed the Loci-Boltzmann rarefied gas kinetic flow solver for integration with existing PSI continuum flow solvers. Chem and GGFS are two examples for simultaneous operation in the Loci simulation framework. Loci-Boltzmann solves the Boltzmann equation based on the discrete velocity method, which is a method that has seen a good deal of maturity and development over the last 25 years. It applies a finite volume PDE solver that supports accurate two-way communication with continuum Navier-Stokes PDE solvers. Now, I say that to contrast against DSMC-based coupling approaches with CFD, which typically have sort of a noisy transfer from statistical DSMC data to CFD. So we avoid a lot of those issues just inherently in that we're dealing with two finite volume PDE codes. So we have sort of a naturally consistent, smooth interfacing. The Loci-Chem Boltzmann and Loci-GGFS Boltzmann capabilities are two implementations that we've developed that allow for automatic cell-by-cell switching between the rarefied and the continuum solvers based on continuum breakdown criteria. And the Boltzmann code introduces a solution for the velocity distribution function, so that inherently adds some additional costs in each computational cell. The higher cost there is minimized by just only activating the Boltzmann code locally in rarefied regions. And extensions to GPGPU use will further dramatically reduce the cost in the future. And then finally, a three-way capability where we've coupled Chem, GGFS, and Boltzmann together is in progress, and we have a prototype of that. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, in the Loci-Boltzmann solution procedure, we describe the state of a gas using a velocity distribution function, F, which is defined on the independent variable space of space, time, molecular velocity, and internal energy. So that's an 8-dimensional independent variable space. The evolution of F is governed by the generalized Boltzmann equation shown at the bottom. And so we essentially compute macroscopic flow quantities, density, temperature, velocity, et cetera, by evaluating moments of that distribution function over that 8-dimensional space. Next slide, please. This just shows sort of some of the history of verification and validation studies that we've done using the Boltzmann code. So we've you can, when you're solving the Boltzmann equation, you can do interesting things like look at the inside the structure inside of shock waves. So we've done that for monatomic and diatomic gases as well for systems thereof. Also looked at different supersonic flat plate thermal boundary layer cases. So we're modeling both the translational and rotational energy for those simulations. And then on the bottom right, we have an example where we have a single species equivalent gas representation of an N2O2 mixture for a Mach 10 cylinder problem. That's a calorically imperfect but thermally perfect gas. Matches very well with published data, and a lot of these cases show very good agreement with experimental data. Next slide, please. And then just very briefly here, this is a comparison between the Loci-Boltzmann code and the Socrates P DSMC code for a 2D axisymmetric supersonic jet application. The contours on the top are the Loci-Boltzmann code, and on the bottom are DSMC. And from left to right, we see temperature, axial velocity, and radial velocity. So we're getting very good agreement here for this plume flow structure against the SOC-P DSMC prediction. Next slide, please. And then this is the well-known plume impingement study of Lega of 1991. This specifically, we're looking at a sonic orifice free jet case here. It's a 90-degree plume impingement case. The chamber pressure is 0.01 bar. While I haven't shown it here, the local Knudsen number is basically 1 or greater through essentially the entire flow domain. So it's a fully rarefied case. You see evolution of Mach number and the computational mesh, which we're adapting to adapt to the plume structure and the shear layers there for that case. On the lower right, you see a comparison of the loci-chem continuum model against Loci-Boltzmann, and then experimental data is shown there. So the continuum model here is deviating, is essentially over-predicting the normalized shear stress through the entire, along the entire plate surface, whereas the Loci-Boltzmann code is showing us a very good agreement with experimental data, sort of showing the importance here for PSI prediction in solving the Boltzmann equation rarefied flow model where the flow is fully rarefied. Next slide, please. And then this just shows, so when we couple with other codes, we compute the continuum breakdown criterion. It's essentially a local Knudsen number estimation computed as a ratio of microscopic to macroscopic length scales. We then perform a dynamic rebalancing of the continuum and kinetic cell decomposition, basically thresholding on that continuum breakdown criteria. So I show here sort of the progression from computing the flow, computing the breakdown criteria, and then we end up with these different continuum kinetic cell distributions based on different thresholds. We've used this approach coupling with chem and with the GGFS solver. Next slide, please. So this is just some nice success stories that I wanted to highlight here. The results on the left are a fully 3D coupled Chem-Boltzmann prediction. These were carried out by the folks at NASA Marshall's Fluid Dynamics branch, Jeff West and his team, Jason Howison and Andrew Weaver. So we, through the SBIR program, we were directly supporting their use of the tool in generation of these results. And so we basically generated a simplified case and had to work through a number of different issues until we were able to achieve this nice validated result. So basically we're applying the Loci-Boltzmann code just in this narrow sort of cylindrical annulus region, just a handful of cells above the surface of the plate and down to the surface of the plate. The contours there on the far left, the red is basically showing Knudsen number of 1 or greater. The white is essentially set a transitional flow. The blue contours right at the plume and the impingement are essentially slip flow. So right near the plume impingement, we're able to use the Neighbor-Stokes solution, the loci-chem, and match up very well with the experiment, as you can see in the plot in the middle of the normalized shear stress. As we get further away, we're going into fully rarefied flow, and we need actually the Boltzmann equation solution to recover the accuracy to match the experimental data. So yeah, I listed 2 of those publications there on the left. I encourage people to check out really nice studies done there. And then on the right, I show an Apollo LM cratering simulation that we've done to showcase the coupled GGFS Boltzmann capability as well. Next slide, please. And then this is, I've got about a minute left, so this is just sort of hot off the presses. We have an initial 3-way coupling where we've coupled the chem, GGFS, and Boltzmann codes together. Use the local Knudsen number to determine whether the flow is continuum or rarefied. The presence of solid material determines whether a 2-phase gas granular model is needed. And then we use dynamic adaptive gridding as well as dynamic algorithm selection to choose between those 3 solvers. Next slide, please, to conclude. So we've developed and integrated this Boltzmann rarefied flow module into the loci-chem and GGFS PSI simulation tools to enable highly efficient accounting of rarefaction effects in PSI plume structure and erosion mechanisms. It provides higher fidelity plume expansion and impingement flow structure resolution in rarefied atmosphere, and critically enables capture of the significant shear amplification by rarefaction effects in viscous shear surface erosion at PSI onset and during crater growth and ejecta stream formation. Thank you very much.